At 5:43 a.m., the scream that ripped through the mansion wasn't born from fear. It was born from pure entitlement, the kind that blooms in people who think kindness is weakness and generosity is a door left unlocked just for them. It was the scream that changed everything for 70-year-old Veronica Hale, a sharp-minded millionaire grandma whose life's work, sacrifices, and legacy were about to be stolen right from under her while she was sipping tea on a sunny holiday trip. She had no idea that while she enjoyed her well-earned rest, someone back home was sharpening a knife, not to stab her, but to slice her life apart. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, because stories like this, real, chilling, and jaw-dropping, are what we uncover every day. Veronica's nightmare began the moment her phone buzzed with a message from her son, Preston, a gentle, 32-year-old man bound to a wheelchair after a tragic accident years earlier. Preston rarely called unless it was serious. His voice trembled through the speaker, broken and afraid. "Mom, something's wrong. Harper, she changed the locks. They won't let me in. I'm outside our home." Veronica froze. On the other end of the call, she could hear heavy breathing, the sound of Preston struggling outside the mansion's front door, completely helpless. Her mind struggled to grasp what she was hearing. Harper, the woman she had welcomed into the family, supported financially and trusted, had done the unthinkable. And her brother Mason, a man with a long history of shady behavior and debt, had stepped onto the property like he owned it, as if the security cameras, the marble floors, and the portraits lining the hallway belonged to him. When Veronica rushed home hours later, she expected anger. She expected confrontation. But she did not expect the cold, smug smile that Harper flashed when she opened the door a mere crack and said, "You're not on the deed anymore. This house is ours now. You and your son need to leave." It was like being slapped. For a long second, Veronica couldn't breathe. She stared at Harper, waiting for the punchline that never came. Instead, Harper pushed the door further open, revealing Mason carrying boxes across the hallway, setting his belongings on the floor while whistling, as if he belonged there, as if this was normal. Preston sat beside his mother, silent, ashamed. Because he couldn't fight, couldn't stand, couldn't push back physically. And Harper knew it. She had waited for the moment Veronica was away, waited for the moment Preston would be powerless, and then struck like a vulture. Veronica tried reasoning. "Harper, this is my home. I built this place with my own hands. What you're doing is illegal." Harper smirked. "Not anymore. Mason found the papers. You signed over part of the property years ago for tax purposes. Remember? Well, we finalized the rest while you were gone." "You forged," Veronica whispered. "I signed," Mason cut in mockingly. "And your signature is pretty easy to replicate." The world tilted. Veronica felt heat rising in her chest, not from rage, but from disbelief so deep it felt like drowning. She reached for the doorframe to steady herself, while Harper added, "We're being generous, letting you walk away peacefully. Take a hotel or, I don't know, one of your charity houses." Preston let out a soft, broken sob. Harper sneered. "Oh, please, Preston, don't start crying. You've been a burden long enough." Veronica's heart snapped. She stepped forward, eyes blazing, but before she could speak, Harper shut the door, hard in their faces. The echo was like a gunshot. For a moment, Veronica stood still, wind brushing against her hair, the early morning sun catching the faint tremble of her hands. Preston reached out, touching her arm gently. "Mom, I'm sorry." She turned to him, and something changed in her eyes. The shock melted. The confusion died. And what replaced it was colder than winter, stronger than steel, and sharper than every betrayal combined. Resolve. Veronica Hale wasn't just a grandmother. She wasn't just wealthy. She wasn't just kind. She was a woman who had built empires, won courtroom battles, survived bankruptcy twice, and raised a son alone while fighting the world tooth and nail. Harper thought she stole a mansion. Mason thought he forged a signature. They thought Veronica was old, soft, predictable. They thought wrong. Veronica placed her hand on Preston's shoulder. Don't apologize. This is just the beginning. But where will we go? He whispered. A slow, almost chilling smile curved her lips. We're not going anywhere. They are. And in that moment, the gears began turning. The kind of gears that only a woman with experience, power, and nothing left to lose could set into motion. This wasn't just going to be justice. It was going to be a carefully crafted, unstoppable, unforgettable revenge they never saw coming. Veronica guided Preston back to the car, helping him settle in carefully, her mind already constructing the first steps of the plan. She wasn't loud. She didn't rant or scream. That wasn't her style. Instead, she pulled out her phone, opening contacts that Harper had no idea existed. Lawyers who owed her favors, investigators who specialized in digging where no one else could, and friends in positions that could shift the ground beneath anyone's feet. As she drove away from the mansion, Veronica's eyes lifted toward the rearview mirror, capturing the house where she had poured her soul for decades. Her jaw tightened, her posture straightened, and although she said nothing, the silence itself was a promise. She knew everything. Veronica didn't go to a hotel. She didn't retreat or crumble the way Harper expected. Instead, she drove Preston to a quiet part of town, a place where the buildings looked abandoned, but were very much alive behind the scenes. It was an old brick warehouse she had bought years ago, disguised as a failing storage company. On paper, it looked useless. In reality, it was her private command center, a place she created long before Preston was born, back when business was a battlefield and she had to protect every asset from people who would gladly stab her in the back for $1. Inside, lights flickered on automatically as she rolled Preston's wheelchair across the concrete floor. Cabinets lined the walls, each labeled, each organized, each containing files, hard drives, and documents no one knew existed. The air smelled like dust, ink, and strategy. Preston looked around, confused. He had never been here before. "Mom, what is this place?" he asked. Veronica locked the steel door behind them. "A reminder," she said softly, "that I've been preparing for snakes long before Harper slithered into our lives." She wheeled him beside a long metal table and opened a drawer, pulling out a thick folder stamped with red tape. "This folder," she said, placing it down with slow, deliberate intention, "is every piece of leverage I've kept on them." Preston blinked. "On Harper?" "On everyone," she corrected. "Because power isn't safe unless you can prove who is willing to steal it." She flipped the folder open. Inside were photographs, receipts, copies of emails, witness statements. Preston leaned forward, eyes widening. "Mom, why did you keep all this?" "Because people show you who they are long before you believe them." Harper was charming, polite, eager. Too eager. She married you and suddenly her lifestyle changed. Spa trips, designer bags, nights out she hid from you. Loans she said were for business ventures, but were really for Mason's gambling. Preston swallowed hard. He always suspected something was wrong. But Harper had been careful. So careful he thought he was imagining it. Veronica placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. None of this is your fault. Before he could respond, the warehouse door buzzed. Someone had arrived. Veronica didn't look startled. Instead, she pulled out her phone and checked the screen. "Right on time," she whispered. A moment later, the door opened, and in walked a tall man in a charcoal suit, sleek, composed, and carrying a leather briefcase. Preston recognized him instantly. "Mr. Adler?" he whispered. Attorney Jacob Adler wasn't just any lawyer. He was the kind of man who built his reputation breaking apart corporations and exposing schemes so complex that an average attorney wouldn't even understand where to begin. He walked in, nodded politely, and said, "Mrs. Hale, I assume this situation requires precision." Veronica smiled. "And subtle force." "How?" Adler set the briefcase on the table. "You said there were forged documents." "Ah. Harper and Mason think they were clever. They weren't." Veronica handed him the papers she had found before her trip, bank inconsistencies, tax filings she had never approved, and copies of her signature she never wrote. Adler's brows arched. "This is not amateur forgery. Someone helped them." "Mason's casino friends," Veronica replied. "I paid one of them years ago to stay silent. I think he's ready to talk." Adler began scanning the documents. "If this goes to court, they'll be destroyed. But I assume you want something more poetic." Veronica's eyes glinted. "I want them to lose everything. Slowly, painfully, but legally." Adler nodded. "Then we start by freezing the accounts Harper stole access to, and we report the forged deed transfer. Law enforcement will handle the rest." "But," he paused, glancing at Preston, "this will get messy." "It already is," Preston whispered. Veronica squeezed his hand. "But we're taking control now." Adler left shortly after, taking the documents with him. When the door shut behind him, silence settled over the warehouse. Preston stared ahead, jaw tightening. "Mom, why didn't you tell me all this before?" "Because you loved her," Veronica said softly. "And I love you." He lowered his gaze. "I feel stupid." "You're not stupid. You're loyal," she said. "And that's something Harper was never worthy of." Preston took a shaky breath. "What do we do now?" Veronica walked toward a locked safe in the corner. She keyed in a long code, then opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of envelopes, labeled, dated, and sealed. She took out 3. Then she handed one to Preston. "Now," she said, "we start phase 2. Before Preston could ask what that meant, Veronica's phone buzzed. She glanced down and smiled. "It's beginning," she murmured. The message was from one of her investigators. "Found Mason. Casino debt worse than expected. He's being watched. He won't hold up long." Veronica exhaled slowly. "Perfect." Preston looked uneasy. "Mom, what are you going to do?" She turned to him, her expression calm, controlled, terrifyingly composed. "Darling," she said gently, "I'm going to make Harper and Mason tear each other apart before the law even reaches them." Preston swallowed hard. "They'll turn on each other?" "Oh yes," Veronica said, turning off the warehouse lights. "Because thieves don't trust thieves. And once I pull the right thread, their entire little scheme will unravel from the inside." She began pushing his wheelchair toward the exit. "But first, we let them believe they've won. That is when people become sloppiest. That is when they brag. That is when they make mistakes." She locked the door behind them. The cold morning air brushed against their faces. "Tomorrow," Veronica said, helping Preston into the car, "the real show begins." Veronica didn't sleep that night. She didn't need to. People driven by vengeance don't tire, they sharpen. While Preston rested in the guest room of the hidden warehouse, she sat alone at the metal table, watching the security feed from the mansion. Harper and Mason had no idea she still had access. They laughed, drank expensive wine she paid for, walked across the marble floors she had designed, and bragged loudly about their victory. Harper twirled her hair in front of the hallway mirror, wearing one of Veronica's luxury robes as if she owned it. Finally, she said to Mason, "This house, this life, it's ours. I told you Preston would never fight back." Pathetic, useless. He never deserved any of this. Mason snorted. And that old lady? Weak. Always smiling, like she wouldn't dare lift a finger. Easy target. Veronica watched them with a still expression, like she was studying insects. It wasn't the insults that bothered her. It was the arrogance, the belief that they were untouchable. That's what she planned to use against them. The next morning, she drove Preston to a discreet rehabilitation center she privately funded years ago. Despite his disability, he deserved dignity, safety, comfort, and Veronica intended to give him exactly that. The staff rushed out to greet them. Everyone knew Veronica Hale. Inside, soft music played, sunlight streamed across polished floors, and nurses whispered respectfully. Preston looked up at his mother. "Are we hiding here?" "We are waiting," she said. "And watching." After settling him in, she stepped outside where Jacob Adler was leaning against his car, papers in hand. "I have something," he said. "What did you find?" Adler handed her a thick envelope. Everything Harper and Mason forged. "You were right, their signatures don't hold up legally, but there's more." Veronica nodded slowly. "Tell me." Adler opened his briefcase and pulled out a USB drive. "Your investigator secured a recording from one of Mason's gambling partners. Mason bragged about how he planned to sell parts of the property illegally. He wasn't just stealing the mansion. He intended to liquidate everything." Veronica's jaw tightened. "And Harper?" "Complicit," Adler said. "She knew everything, helped him, encouraged him, and sent money to cover Mason's debts using accounts under your name." Veronica didn't flinch. "Good. The more rope they have, the faster they'll hang themselves." Adler studied her carefully. "You want revenge, not justice." "I want balance," she corrected. "They took my home, my son's security, my peace. I will take everything they value, and I will make them hand it to me themselves." Adler exhaled. "Then you'll like this part. Mason owes the wrong people 2 days, maybe 3, before they come for him." Veronica's smile was thin, quiet, and deeply dangerous. Perfect timing. She left the rehab center and headed back to the warehouse, where she opened the 3 envelopes she had taken from the safe. Each one was a step in a path Harper and Mason didn't know they were walking. Envelope 1, a signed agreement between Veronica and the bank manager she had helped years ago, giving her immediate authority to freeze any suspicious financial movement connected to her name. Envelope 2, a document granting her investigator full legal access to track Harper's and Mason's communications. Envelope 3, a letter she had written to herself years ago, titled "In Case of Betrayal." It held instructions, cold, detailed, merciless, for exactly what to do when trust turned into a weapon. She read it slowly, absorbing her own words. "When they take everything from you, don't fight. Watch. Wait. Then hit where it hurts most. Each other." That night, the first thread snapped. Veronica sent Harper an anonymous message with a single screenshot. Mason's gambling debts. Numbers glaring red. Marked, overdue. Beneath it, a note. Bracket, he used your name on some of these loans. Strong. Harper read it in the kitchen, her face draining of color. She immediately stormed upstairs, yelling at Mason. Did you use my name, my credit? Period. Mason didn't deny it. Relax. I'll fix it. Period. You said everything was clean, Harper screamed. Period. Mason shoved past her. Stop panicking. If you hadn't spent half the money on useless things. Period. Useless? She shrieked. I married Preston thinking I'd get this lifestyle, not your garbage debts. Period. They argued for almost an hour. Veronica watched from the warehouse feed, her expression calm, her fingers tapping rhythmically. Phase 1 was working. The next morning, Veronica took action again, this time sending Mason an anonymous photo of Harper's secret bank account, the one she never told him about. Mason read it, eyes widening. Harper's been hiding money? As expected, he snapped. He confronted her in the dining room, slamming the photo onto the table. You greedy little snake. You hid this from me? Harper fired back. Because I knew you'd waste it on gambling. And I'm the one who did the work to get this house. This house? Mason laughed. I did the forging. Veronica made popcorn. At the rehab center, Preston watched her reactions carefully. You're enjoying this. No, Veronica said softly. But I'm satisfied. He frowned. Mom, will we get the house back? We'll get everything back, she said. And they will destroy each other, long before we lift a finger. Preston hesitated. And what happens to them? Veronica's voice dropped to a calm whisper. I don't destroy people. I let them destroy themselves. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Harper and Mason's alliance cracked further. Mason began drinking heavily, pacing the halls. Paranoid, someone was watching him. Harper spent hours on the phone trying to hide her accounts. That afternoon, Veronica made another move. She mailed a physical envelope to the mansion, one addressed only to Harper. Inside, a copy of Mason's recorded confession about forging Veronica's signatures. Harper read it alone, her pulse racing. She knew one thing. If Mason went down, he'd take her with him. By evening, their partnership was hanging by a thread, a very weak one. Veronica closed her laptop and whispered, Tomorrow, it breaks. Harper didn't sleep. She spent the whole night pacing through the mansion like a shadow, clutching Mason's recorded confession in her trembling fingers. Every creak in the house made her jump. Every car passing outside made her think the police were coming. Every glance at Mason made her stomach twist with disgust and fear. Mason, meanwhile, was spiraling. He had been nursing a bottle of whiskey for hours, muttering under his breath, twitching at the slightest sound. He knew the debts were closing in. He knew the people he owed didn't send warnings, they sent consequences. And now he suspected Harper was hiding even more money than he thought. The mansion that had felt like a victory yesterday had become a claustrophobic prison. The walls seemed to listen, the hallways seemed to narrow, and every mirror reflected their paranoia. Veronica watched the cracks widening. She didn't rush. She didn't force anything. She simply fed their suspicions like fuel to a wildfire. Another anonymous message went out early in the morning, but this one was different. It went to both Harper and Mason simultaneously. A short sentence. 9 words. Enough to turn suspicion into war. Only one of you will escape what's coming. At 6:20 a.m., the mansion erupted. Harper burst into Mason's room, waving the note like a flag of accusation. This is your fault. They're coming for us because you forged the papers. Mason shot up from the bed, wild-eyed. Someone's threatening us, Harper. Someone who knows everything. That's not my fault. You used my name for your debts. You hid money. You ruined everything. You dragged me into it. Their screams bounced off the marble floors. Veronica watched, expressionless. Their alliance wasn't just cracking anymore. It was shattering. But the breaking point came when Mason lunged for Harper's phone. "Give me the account details." Harper screamed and pulled back. "Get your hands off me." In the struggle, Mason slipped, crashing into the glass coffee table. He didn't get up immediately, dazed and bleeding slightly from his arm. Harper backed away, breathing heavily, shaking, horrified by how far it had gone. Mason sat up slowly, glaring at her with something darker than anger. Something like betrayal. "You pushed me. You attacked me." Harper snapped back. Mason's eyes hardened. "I'm not going down alone." And Harper realized it. He would destroy her if it meant saving himself. She ran upstairs, slamming her bedroom door behind her. Mason stayed downstairs, staring at the blood on his arm, breathing heavily as he whispered to himself, "I won't go to jail. I won't." Veronica leaned back in her chair and whispered, and now they panic. Later that afternoon, she began Phase 3. She arranged a meeting, but not with Harper or Mason. With a man named Lawson Trent, a quiet, frighteningly efficient financial investigator she had hired years ago to protect Preston's future. Lawson wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a cop. He was the person people called when they needed every hidden truth dragged into the light. He arrived at the warehouse with a simple nod. "Mrs. Hale, I assume things are unfolding as you predicted." "Faster." Veronica replied, "They're turning on each other. But we need a final push." Lawson sat beside her and opened a laptop. "We intercepted communication between Mason and one of his lenders. He's planning to sell the mansion piece by piece. Artwork, furniture, anything valuable." Veronica's eyes flashed. "He's liquidating my home?" "Yes, in secret. He hopes to run before the collectors find him." "And Harper?" "She's trying to transfer what's left of your stolen funds into an overseas account. Very sloppy, very desperate." Veronica folded her hands calmly. "Good. That means they're distracted enough." Preston entered the room quietly, wheeling himself closer. "Mom, is it time?" She rested a hand on his shoulder. "Almost." Preston hesitated. "I still don't understand how you're so calm." Veronica smiled, not warmly, but with a deep, chilling certainty. "Because revenge is like chess, Preston. You never rush your moves. You wait until your opponent is trapped, cornered, and unaware they've already lost." That evening, Veronica drove to a police station, but not to file a report. Instead, she met with Chief Donovan, an old friend from her philanthropic days. He owed her his career. She whispered a few sentences to him, handed over a small drive, and left without explanation. She didn't need to explain. Donovan knew she never wasted time on anything insignificant. By midnight, she received a text. "Understood. Proceeding." Veronica's plan was almost complete. Back at the mansion, chaos. Harper sat on the edge of the bed, trembling as she stared at the envelope Veronica had anonymously mailed earlier. Mason's confession, his threats, his debts, his recklessness. She knew he would drag her down. She knew he would betray her. Meanwhile, Mason was in the living room, on the phone with someone who didn't sound patient. "I have the money coming," Mason stuttered. "Just give me a few days. No, don't come here. I'll pay, I swear." The call ended abruptly. Mason dropped the phone, terrified. Harper heard him from upstairs. For the first time, she truly understood. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't fun. This wasn't luxury. This was danger. And both of them were in far over their heads. At 2:11 a.m., Veronica sent them the final message. "The law will arrive soon. Choose wisely who you blame." Harper's scream echoed through the halls. Mason punched the wall. Both realized They were about to be caught, and both knew the other was the perfect scapegoat. Veronica closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, deliberately, centering herself. Then she said the words Preston had been waiting to hear. "It's time." Veronica woke before dawn, long before the city had even begun to stir. She stood by the warehouse window, watching the horizon slowly lighten, her expression calm, too calm. Preston noticed it immediately when he wheeled into the room. "Mom, what happens today?" he asked quietly. Veronica turned to him, her face softening just a bit. "Today," she said, "Harper and Mason learn what it feels like to lose something they believed they'd already won." Preston's chest tightened. "Mom, I don't want anyone to get hurt." She knelt beside him and took his hand. "I'm not hurting them. They hurt themselves. All I did was shine a light on the truth they tried to hide." Preston nodded, but his expression showed he still didn't fully understand. And maybe he wasn't supposed to. Veronica had always carried burdens, so he wouldn't have to. This was no different. A soft chime echoed through the warehouse, one of Veronica's security alerts. She checked her phone. A live feed notification flashed. "Phase 4, she murmured. "They're waking up." At the mansion, Harper stumbled downstairs with puffy eyes, wearing the same clothes from the night before. Mason was pacing the foyer, phone in hand, breathing heavily. "They're coming," Mason muttered. "I know it. I can feel it." Harper ignored him and opened the front curtains a crack, just as a black, unmarked SUV drove slowly past the mansion. Her heart nearly stopped. "Police?" she whispered. Mason shook his head, vigorously. "No. Worse." Harper stepped away from the window, terrified. Mason backed into the staircase, clutching the railing, as if expecting someone to burst through the door. And Veronica watched everything from her warehouse screen, the corners of her mouth curving just slightly. Lawson entered the room. "Everything set. Adler confirmed the financial freeze has gone into effect." "Good," Veronica replied. "Let them try to run now." At the mansion, Mason's phone buzzed. He snatched it up, then froze. His bank app showed zeros. Every account, every card, every hidden stash. "No," he shouted, throwing the phone to the floor. "No." They froze everything. Harper rushed over, grabbed the phone, and saw her accounts were frozen too. She let out a choked gasp. "What do we do? Mason, what do we do?" "Don't ask me," Mason screamed. "We're dead, Harper. Those guys are going to tear me apart because you didn't send the money in time." Me?" she shrieked. "You put us in this mess." Chaos, beautiful, predictable chaos, filled the mansion like smoke. Veronica watched them implode from miles away, her posture relaxed, her breathing steady. She didn't enjoy destruction, she enjoyed honesty. And panic stripped people down to the truth faster than anything else. Preston wheeled beside her, staring at the screen. "Mom, they look terrified." "They should be. What happens next?" Veronica placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Now comes the part they never saw coming. She pressed a small button on her phone. At the mansion, the doorbell rang. Harper nearly jumped out of her skin. Mason stiffened. Neither moved for a full 10 seconds. The bell rang again. Harper whispered, Maybe it's a neighbor." "No neighbor comes at 6 in the morning, Mason hissed. The bell rang a third time, followed by a calm knock. Mason stepped forward cautiously, grabbed a decorative statue for protection, and slowly cracked the door open, only to find Chief Donovan, 2 officers, and a woman in a navy suit standing calmly on the porch. Mason's face drained of color. Harper appeared behind him, eyes wide with terror. Chief Donovan held up a folder. "We're here to discuss allegations of fraud, identity theft, and illegal property transfer." Harper nearly collapsed. What do you mean?" The woman in the navy suit stepped forward. "We have evidence connecting both of you to forged signatures belonging to Veronica Hale." Hearing her name made Mason's knees shake. If Veronica was back, they were done. Finished. Harper's voice cracked. "We didn't do anything." Mason cut her off, panicking. "It was her. She made me do it." "She planned everything." Harper gasped, betrayed at lightning speed. "No, he's lying. He did the forging. I had nothing to do with it." Within seconds, they were attacking each other verbally, desperately trying to save themselves. The officers exchanged looks. Chief Donovan sighed. "This is enlightening." Meanwhile, Veronica stood in the warehouse doorway, watching the live footage with Preston. "And now," she said, "they eat each other alive." Preston swallowed. "Mom, are they going to jail?" "That's not up to me," she said softly. "But I made sure the truth was delivered to the right hands." Harper burst into tears on the doorstep, screaming that Mason had forced her. Mason shouted back, insisting Harper was the mastermind. Neighbors peeked out from windows. Cars slowed as people recognized the mansion. Their humiliation was public, loud, inevitable. "Mom," Preston whispered, "this is brutal." Veronica rested a hand on his cheek. "They kicked you out of your home. They stole everything from us. They stripped us of safety. Humiliation is the smallest consequence." Lawson approached from behind. "Mrs. Hale, the officers have what they need. It's done." Veronica nodded. "Thank you." She turned to Preston. "Ready? For what?" She handed him a small remote with a single button. "For taking back what's ours." He hesitated, staring at her with wide, uncertain eyes. "Me?" "Yes," she said gently. "This is your home they stole. You deserve to reclaim it." Preston looked down at the remote, then at the screen. Harper, sobbing. Mason yelling at officers. Their entire scheme collapsing before sunrise. He pressed the button. At the mansion, the officers stepped aside as a long black car pulled up the driveway. The doors opened slowly, intentionally, and Veronica stepped out, wearing a tailored suit, her posture regal, composed, unshakable. Harper's scream echoed off the stone walls. Mason stumbled backward like he'd seen a ghost. Veronica walked toward them with the cold elegance of someone who had already won long before the game began. And Preston watched from the warehouse feed, heart pounding. "Mom," he whispered, "they're terrified of you." "They should be," she replied calmly, "because now the real consequences begin. Let them panic a little longer," Veronica finished calmly, setting her phone down on the steel table. Her voice held the same quiet authority that once made CEOs tremble and entire boardrooms fall silent. Lawson nodded. "They're destabilizing fast. The more desperate they get, the more mistakes they'll make." Veronica's eyes didn't leave the screen. "And the more mistakes they make, the easier it will be to remove them permanently." Preston shifted uneasily. "Mom, what exactly is supposed to happen today?" Veronica pulled a single key from her pocket and placed it on the table. Preston recognized it, a key to a vault he had never been allowed to open. "Today," Veronica said, "their lies stop being whispers and start becoming evidence." She pressed a button on her phone, switching the screen to a second camera feed, this one from the mansion's grand study. It showed a small, discreet, black device blinking from behind a glass shelf. Preston frowned. What is that? A transmitter, Veronica replied. One I installed years before Harper ever joined this family. Today, it will record every word they say, every accusation, every confession, every lie they use to save themselves. She took a slow breath. By the time the police arrive, they won't need my files. Harper and Mason will have incriminated each other. Preston's eyebrows pulled together. Police? Today? Veronica stood, adjusting her coat with the calm precision of someone preparing for a meeting, not a war. You can't win a battle without an audience, sweetheart. And the law is the perfect audience. A new alert flashed on her phone. Mason trying to leave the house through back entrance. Veronica smirked. And so it begins. Mason yanked open the back door. A duffel bag slung over his shoulder. It was stuffed with cash he'd stolen from Veronica's emergency safes, jewelry he planned to pawn, and documents he barely skimmed. But when he stepped outside, he froze. Two men stood beside the gate. Not police, not neighbors. Debt collectors. The same ones he had been avoiding. Mason stumbled backward into the doorframe. Hey, I got the money, all right? I'm working on it. The taller man took a slow step forward. You said that last week. Harper watched from inside through the kitchen doorway, her breath catching. She backed away before they could see her. Mason slammed the door shut and locked it, chest heaving. We're dead, Harper. We're dead. Harper screamed back. You did this. You forged the papers. You dragged me into this mess. Mason roared. And you stole the money. You lied to me. You hid accounts. You were planning to leave me to burn. Their shouting filled the mansion like thunder. The transmitter blinked, recording everything. Preston watched the chaos unfold on screen. Mom, this is too much. Veronica stepped behind him, resting a hand on his shoulder. No, darling, she whispered. This is exactly enough. Lawson approached with a tablet. Chief Donovan confirmed the units are en route. Now make a controlled entry. Preston's eyes widened. Now? Veronica nodded slowly, her gaze sharp as glass. Now, Harper and Mason have revealed who they are. Their words will finish what their greed started. She turned to the feeds. Harper crying, Mason pacing like a trapped animal, both screaming accusations louder and louder. They thought they stole my life, Veronica said softly. But all they really did was walk into their own ending. She pressed another button on her phone. A notification pulsed across the screen. Police dispatched ETA 7 minutes. Veronica closed her eyes for a moment. Calm, cold, certain. When the law walks through that door, she whispered, my house becomes mine again. Preston looked up at her. And Harper, Mason? Veronica opened her eyes. They won't be walking out. The mansion doors swung open, just as Veronica had predicted. The first uniformed officer stepped inside, followed by two more, their eyes scanning the grand foyer for signs of trouble. Harper clutched her designer robe, trembling, while Mason froze mid-step, duffel bag still in hand, his face pale and sweating. The officers spoke calmly, but firmly. Harper Lawrence, Mason Keller, you are under investigation for fraud, identity theft, and illegal property transfer. Harper shrieked, no, this isn't real. You don't understand. Mason lunged, but the officer stepped between them, blocking him. Sir, calm down. Step away. And that's when the cameras, Veronica's silent, omnipresent eyes, caught everything. Every word, every confession, every panicked scream. Their own voices became the evidence they couldn't deny. You forged the signature. Harper yelled at Mason, pointing a shaking finger. I never. You hid the money from me, Mason shouted back. I did all the work, and you? The officers exchanged looks. One flipped open a notebook. We have recordings of everything. Every conversation, every attempt to mislead, every plan to defraud Mrs. Hale. Harper's knees buckled. Mason's chest heaved. Their alliance had crumbled in front of dozens of witnesses, their own greed turning against them like a predator they could not escape. Veronica watched from the warehouse feed, sitting calmly, hands folded. Preston beside her wheeled closer, eyes wide. Mom, they're done. They were done the moment they thought they could take what wasn't theirs, Veronica replied softly. The officers read Harper and Mason their rights, handcuffing them carefully. They did not resist, not because they feared the police, but because the weight of their own betrayal had crushed them. Harper's voice was barely a whisper. How did she know? Mason's eyes darted frantically around the room. She can't. This isn't possible. Veronica's smile was calm, almost imperceptible. You taught me how to do this. Every lie you told, every attempt to cheat and steal, every weakness you exposed in yourselves, it all led here. You didn't steal a house. You exposed who you really are. Preston wheeled closer, watching their faces drain of color. Mom, it's over? Veronica nodded. It's over, and from now on, they will never touch our lives again. She drove to the mansion later that morning. Preston by her side, she stepped onto the marble floors she had built, breathing in the familiar scent of her home. It had been violated, yes, but the violation was temporary. Justice had returned it to her, delivered in the most precise way possible, by their own hands. Lawson Trent was there, quietly gathering the remaining documents. Mrs. Hale, he said, everything is secure. They'll be prosecuted and legally stripped of the assets they tried to steal. Your ownership is unassailable. Veronica nodded, a quiet satisfaction settling in her chest. Good, that's exactly how it should be. Preston wheeled toward the window, gazing at the gardens that had once been a place of peace and now felt even more like a fortress. Mom, we did it, he whispered. No, Veronica corrected, her eyes softening as she rested a hand on his shoulder. They did it themselves. Outside, the police led Harper and Mason to waiting vehicles. The neighbors who had watched for hours whispered among themselves, astonished by the fall of the people they once envied. In mere hours, the house that had been stolen had become a monument to truth, vigilance, and patience. Veronica and Preston walked through the halls together, untouched portraits watching over them. Every room told a story of resilience, sacrifice, and unwavering strategy. No one would ever dare cross them again. She turned to Preston, her gaze steady, and whispered, Remember, darling, power isn't about force. It's about knowing exactly when to act and letting the world reveal its own mistakes. Preston nodded, a quiet smile forming. I understand now, Mom. I understand completely. And as they stood in the sunlight, streaming through the mansion's grand windows, the house seemed to breathe again. A home reclaimed, a legacy restored, and a lesson delivered so perfectly. Harper and Mason would carry the memory of it, the sting of their own greed, for the rest of their lives. Veronica Hale, the millionaire grandmother, had not only reclaimed her property, she had orchestrated a revenge so precise, so unstoppable, that no one would ever forget her name. The mansion was hers, her son was safe, and the people who thought they were clever enough to steal her life had fallen completely into the trap she had set. Silence filled the halls. Peace settled over the estate, and in that quiet, calm, victorious moment, Veronica allowed herself the tiniest, satisfied smile. Justice had been served. Not loudly, not violently, but perfectly.